I hate to sell. I hate selling. If you cannot sell it, you do not have a business, you have a hobby. You see people outside and they're all standing in the rain and they're getting soaked. Do you feel bad for selling them an umbrella? You are the bottleneck of your business. The market does not care about your feelings. Most people are going to quit too early because they couldn't stomach the consistency of the slow, boring stuff. The successful entrepreneurs are not the ones with the best idea. They're the ones who execute the fastest. You either adapt or you die. Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. Today, we are talking all things about the hard truths of what it actually takes to be an entrepreneur. So many of us want to understand what are the strategies we need to know, what are the steps we need to take, what are the hacks, what are the tactics. But I don't think enough of us ask the question of who do we really need to become to step into that full expression of what it truly means to be an entrepreneur, and not just to call ourselves an entrepreneur, but also to be a very successful entrepreneur. And as someone myself who has coached all kinds of different stages. I've coached people who are brand new in business, all the way up to people who are doing multiple seven figures a year. And there are just some truths that you need to accept and that you have to swallow if you really are wanting to have longevity in this game of business. And so today I'm going to go through what I consider to be some of the top hard truths that many people that I know who are very successful have not only identified, but have accepted deep into the way that they operate as a person and also in their business. So, one of the things that we know is that a lot of the things that we want to see success in, that we want to see momentum in, are often kind of boring, right? Like, if you think about even the goal of wanting to, for example, get more fit, well, there's obviously all of the hacks and tactics. You can do the intermittent fasting, you can do the keto, you could do the carb cycling, you could do the juice cleanse, you could do all of the things. But at the end of the day, what we know works, it has worked, it still works, is moving your body and eating healthy. But why do none of us do it? That's because so many of us struggle to just stick to that simple, basic, straightforward plan because it is slow and it is simple. And as a result of that, it's boring. And so, a lot of the things that I will say are the most needle moving in a business are also the same way. A lot of the things that you're going to see change with and momentum with oftentimes can feel a little bit boring. And so, hard truth number one is that there's a lot of people who cannot stomach the season or seasons it takes to just do the boring, slow stuff that is required to have the business that you want. As entrepreneurs, and myself included, like I'm not saying this from my high horse. Like, I am someone who's lived and breathed this myself. We have this like need for the dopamine hit. We have this kind of like, what's the next big problem? What's the next big offer? What's the next platform we're going to? We're always looking at like, what's next? What's the next big thing? And that's because we're looking for that dopamine hit. We're looking for that, next big exciting thing that makes us feel like we have a challenge. But what if the growth in your business right now was going to come from the quote unquote eating clean and going to the gym? And so this is an invitation to ask yourself, what are those simple things? What are those things that move the needle because they've moved the needle before? Maybe they're the thing that brought in your last client. They're the things that, have helped your business to be able to scale. But you sometimes find yourself being like, could it really be that easy? Or could it really be that that's the thing that I have to do to see this grow where I want? And I think a lot of the time, because many of us don't believe that those simple, slow, consistent, sustainable things are going to help our growth, we move on and we decide to put our attention, our resources, our money, our time elsewhere. And so a lot of people I will see when I work with them, they'll quit way too early on something that was going to work because they just simply could not handle how simple or basic, truthfully, the actions are that actually would move the needle in their business. So I want you to really think about what is a moment or a time or an area where you were so impatient with progress. You were so antsy that it had to be more complicated. There had to be something else other than what I'm doing right now. And that's the reason we're not growing. You had all these reasons you had to pivot or change elsewhere, and it took you away from the thing that moved the needle. And I this happened for me because I remember when I was growing and scaling my business, one of the core ways that I had generated sales in the beginning was that I was on live, I was interacting with my audience, I was, doing Q&As and things like that. And then I remember as I scaled, I kind of got away from that and I stopped doing it because I thought, okay, well, like I've scaled outside of these activities. And it's interesting because I remember when we started to scale out of things, or I told myself that I had scaled up, I don't do this anymore. I really hadn't taken enough time to assess what was moving the needle. And I kind of scaled out of some of the activities that were the reason we were scaling in the first place. So then we started to be like, why do we feel like this is straining? And that's because we got away from what was the simple needle moving actions that were helping us to grow the business. So, hard truth number one is that truthfully, most people are going to quit too early because not that their idea wasn't good, but because they couldn't stomach the consistency of the slow, boring stuff that was actually the thing that was going to move the needle. The other thing I wanna say is that a hard truth, I feel like I kind of live in this bucket with a lot of people as a business coach myself. And, I have a lot of people who come to me for ideas. I have a lot of people who come to me to say, give me the strategy, give me the insight, give me the steps. Tell me basically the blueprint of what to follow. And if you tell me that, I'm gonna run with it. And truthfully, of all the entrepreneurs that I've coached, there is one core difference between the people that I know that have 2, 3, 4, 5x'd their business in 6 months versus the people who don't. And that is all about execution. And I have entrepreneurs that I will give them on a call an insight of something that I want them to do. And they will literally get off a call with me and like hop onto their live and start to integrate it. I'll give them an idea for a podcast and they'll be like, hey, 2 days later, here's the episode. Can you review it? I will give them insights on something when it comes to their closers or their team to say, this is what you need to adjust on your calls. And they come to me 2 days later being like, hey, I secured 70K in revenue with the changes. Thanks so much. There's just this like speed of integration that they have that really is the difference of the growth that they have in their business and also the growth they have in a lot of areas of their life. And so, one core thing that I think many don't quite integrate as a deep belief and as part of their identity as an entrepreneur is like, it is not about the ideas. There are a million and one different people out there who have had an idea for a business, they've had an idea for marketing, they've had an idea for sales. And they have the idea and they sit on the idea and they brainstorm the idea and they write it in a journal and then they even might even draw it out and they might even go as far as making a big plan of how they'd make that happen. They put it on their vision board. They do all the things that they believe are the conceptualizing they need to see the progress they want. The thing that so many miss the mark on is that it's not about the idea. It's about the execution. And so I also will say one of the difficult things for a lot of people is like your ideas are just ideas. They're going to sit there and they're not going to become anything unless you execute on them. And so I often tell people, look at your business right now. What are the things that you have awareness of, that you have ideas of, things that you have planned, even potentially, things you've brainstormed, you've put on the vision board. But if you're really honest with yourself, you haven't really executed, you haven't really integrated. And a hard truth is the successful entrepreneurs are not the ones with the best idea. They're the ones who execute the fastest and who execute the most aggressively. And I would even argue with some of the entrepreneurs that I coach, they're not even the smartest. Like, I'm not even going to say that I'm the smartest. Like, I don't believe a lot of the people that I coach are the smartest people on the planet. I don't think that I'm the smartest person on the planet, right? Or even in entrepreneurship for that matter. It is not just about the fact, okay, well, you need to be the smartest. You have to have the best idea, the most groundbreaking idea. If you have two people and one person has a better idea, but they never execute it, but the other person has a gist and they press action right away and they learn through the doing, who's going to be ahead quicker? And it's an invitation for us as entrepreneurs to say, what is the idea? What is the brainstorm or the concept I have that I really am not executing on? And it might not even necessarily just be in business. It could also just be in your life. Is there something that you've been talking about and you've been circling around and you've even shared with other people? And again, you've planned, you've had it as a vision, but when you really give yourself that accountability, you haven't done anything about it. And that was this podcast for me. This podcast was something that I had, talked about and conceptualized and thought of for so long. And I kick myself every day that I did not start it earlier. And that's because just like I'm saying, I'm not saying these from a high horse. I too fall into these traps of not always flexing this muscle as fast or as aggressively in every area of my life as I need to. So, like, these are still, even for me, constantly ones that I go back to hold myself accountable and say, where can I be better? And the podcast was a really big aha moment for me because it made me realize that I was pushing off this idea for what I was talking about. I need to have a nice set here and I need to, have good editing and I need to have all these things. Well, at the end of the day, as many of you have shared with me, so thank you, many of you have shared, like, I don't even care. I love listening while I'm on a walk, or I love listening when I'm in the car, or I love just like listening while I'm working out, or even having this in the background. Maybe you're watching this while you're working right now. Like, there is not this need for fancy editing. There's just need for having the conversation and the information. And so it really is not about just this idea of what can I conceptualize or create or think of. It's a matter of what you can execute. And frankly, the most success you're going to have is when you can execute fast. The other thing I want to say is that there's a big truth around marketing that is going to be a core pillar of your success, which is that the market does not care about your feelings. And this is a hard one for a lot of people to swallow. Even for myself, it was a hard one to swallow because I kind of want to explain. Okay, so there's been an era, for example, where we had like a ton of sales of ebooks. Ebooks were like the go-to offer. Everyone and their mom was selling an ebook on the internet. And then ebooks eventually became courses. And then everybody overnight, it was like a few people had courses. They were kind of like the new thing. And then all of a sudden it was like there was this overload of courses. Every single place you went, someone had a course. And then from there, we had the mastermind era, which is where there was every single person seemed to have a group program or a mastermind, and everyone was selling you a group program or mastermind. And so in this, what ends up happening is there's waves in the market. There's waves of even in marketing, which is where we have, the trends were all over the place and everyone was doing a trend. And we had that era where I don't know if you remember this, where like people would have those videos where they had like 3 tips and they would have like a song and they would like be pointing to the tips. And it was like this, again, trend era of marketing. But the thing is, it was an era, meaning that it had its moment and the market shifted. There's been shifts in the market of what kind of offers we're looking for in a given moment. There's a shift in the market of what kind of marketing we want. We had the Instagram era where everything was so aesthetic and every single feed was like a gallery of an art gallery. And now, in a way, the more kind of chaotic and messy it is, somehow the better, right? And TikTok also accentuated that as of recent. So, what we're seeing is that in marketing, in offers, in any industry, there's trends of what the market tells us people want and what they don't want, the way they buy and the way they don't buy. The customer changes, the offer and what we actually crave to invest in changes, and the marketing, meaning the style of delivery of marketing that we like, also changes. So when I work with someone and they say, well, this is how I do things, I often will say, okay, great. But if your only offer, for example, is something that a million and one other people have and your messaging is not distinct, this is not going to sell. Or if you're somebody who's only doing trends on marketing, that's not going to help you in building a personal brand if that's your goal. So, what we're seeing is that markets shift. And when I have conversations with some entrepreneurs, they are very emotional, and you might be one of these. So, if so, this is an invitation for you to look at your business. Are you possibly somebody who's very romantic about the way that you do business? And this is a great quote that I heard that is actually from Gary Vee. And he said, one of the quickest ways to go out of business is to be romantic about the way that you do business. And I just love that quote because I think it's so true. So many of us are so tied to the offer we have, the marketing we have, the way that we sell, the way our business has always been. And because of that, we really just put our stake in the ground that we just don't want to do business another way. And one of the hard truths of entrepreneurship, though, is that the market doesn't care about your feelings. The market doesn't care that you like to sell this way. The market does not care that you like this specific type of marketing. If the market is changing, you either adapt or you die. And that is just the basis of entrepreneurship. And an easy, example of this is Blockbuster. When we think about Blockbuster as a business, I remember as a kid, we would go in and have those experiences where you'd like walk down the aisle and you'd pick out the core videos that you wanted to rent with your family for the weekend. And the Dropbox, we'd put them back into, right? And then we started to get into DVDs, which then started to become on the shelves to replace the VHS. But then, the equivalent of Netflix came around and being able to literally just stream from your TV and have all the movies there and never go to a store. And I remember, learning about Blockbuster and the fact that they had the invitation to move into this style of business. And they were like, no, this is how we do business. This is how we do things. And so they didn't want to become, part of the Netflix and part of, that era of getting it on your home TV. Since then, I believe, and I could be wrong, but I'm nearly certain there's only 1 to 2 actual physical locations of Blockbuster left in the United States. So this is a testament to you either adapt or you die, right? Like it's also, we see this in marketing companies that were, having certain styles of marketing that were not nearly close to inclusive. And then the market demanded something different. They had a different expectation. And they said, if we're going to support a brand and invest with them, we want to feel like there's more inclusion of different types of cultures in this marketing. And so if a company was like, well, then I'm not doing that, that marketing and therefore those sales would be really impacted. So it is an opportunity for us to really recognize that you can feel however you want to feel about your business right now. You can feel however you want to feel about your offers or the way you sell or the way that you market. But if it does not match the desires of the market itself, it doesn't matter because that is your consumer. Those are the people who are going to be buying your product. So it's not a matter of just if you're happy with your business, it's also a matter of, is my business designed to make my customer and my audience happy for what they care about, what they want, and what they're looking for? The other thing that is another truth that I really wanted to share is that, especially as someone who works with basically all scaling businesses at this point, your growth is going to experience the weakest part of your business, the weakest link potentially in your business. So, every new client, every new offer you create, every new team member that you hire, each of these are an invitation that are going to potentially magnify the inefficiencies that you could kind of hide in when you were smaller. And, when you're smaller in business, you're usually a little bit more scrappy, right? Like you're kind of a little bit more, yeah, you're less formal. You don't necessarily have to have all these formalities because without having the formalities, you did just fine, right? But as you scale, especially I would say this is really relevant with, for example, team members. Because if you expand your team and you hire more people, but you don't necessarily have an understanding of what their roles are, what the outcomes are, tracking of their time, if you pay hourly, if you don't have some of these pieces set up, you're going to throw a lot more people, a lot more cost, a lot more tasks into the mix. And without proper structures, you might just have a mess on your hands. So it really is looking at, okay, well, when I hire these team members, now I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling to just see what everybody's doing. It often, when people hire, especially and they expand their team, it really starts to magnify the inefficiencies that are happening because of lack of systems, because of lack of automation, because of lack of data. So that's something we see. We also see, for example, I'm thinking about as well, marketing. One of the core things I see in marketing is that when someone tries to hand off their marketing or they try to get support with their marketing, they don't really have a framework to how they do things. And even in coaching, this is true as well. People try to have a co-coach or they'll try to, in an agency, delegate to somebody else to do the task. But because you don't really have a framework on how you're doing this, you don't really have, you're like, well, I just kind of do it. Or I just kind of, I know what to do. Or I have a framework in my head, but it's not documented anywhere, is the number one thing that I hear. So when you don't have something documented, then you go to give it to somebody and you think, I'm going to scale, I'm going to expand. And so you hire the person to do your marketing and you try to hand off your marketing and you hire maybe, someone to help with delivery and you expand your agency or you try to grow by adding more people. But the problem is when you don't have any framework to teach them because you've never needed one, right? It was just you. When you try to grow in your offers or marketing, then you're like, well, why do I feel like my clients are not getting results? Why do I feel like I'm starting to see my marketing momentum slowly die and kind of deplete here? That's because it really brought to the surface that you really have been winging it. You've really been kind of, deal with this client as I want to, answer that message as I want to. There really hasn't been any streamlining of how you do things. And now it's presenting itself in this moment because you're growing. So one of the things that we know and we anticipate is that when you scale, you need to be ready that all the inefficiencies, all the things in your business that have been areas of opportunity, maybe things that haven't been leveraged, things that, need refining, those things that you've been ignoring. You're like, we don't really care about the data. It's not a big deal right now. Or, we don't need those frameworks because it's not important right now. When you grow, you will not be able to get away from those things. They will present themselves and they will show themselves almost instantly. The other thing that I will say is a big thing that shows itself in scaling is mindset. Because when you, as a CEO or as a leader of a business, have not taken the effective time and the effective resources to really unpack your mindset and to have that mindset routine, you are going to feel it. You're going to experience it. Because really, when you scale, there's this aspect of letting go. There's an aspect of releasing of expectations of, my way or the highway in some areas, not entirely, but you want to be, adapting to what your expectations are. And then there's also this lens of regulation, right? So when you grow, I often will see that the CEO, the person that's actually the one in the business, you will start to see that they really start to get stretched because the comfort level they were at, let's say you're doing, 500,000 a year in your business, if you're at 500,000 a year in your business and you try to go to 2 million, your lack of mindset practices, your lack of regulation, your lack of, mindset fundamentals are going to show themselves because when you have more people to manage, more tasks to manage, more responsibility, more pressure, and you don't have tools to overcome that, it will present itself. It will show itself. So, one of the things you want to accept is that as you grow, the things that you think are, I'm not going to worry about that, the thing that you are ignoring is often going to be the thing that immediately presents itself when you try to grow to the next level. The other thing that I talk to a lot of people about when we are thinking about scaling is also the bottleneck, right? Like they're trying to figure out what is the resistance point? What's the thing that's causing my business to not grow? What is the thing that I need to dive into or I need to refine to get me to the next level? And a lot of the time, a hard truth that you're going to have to acknowledge is it's you. You are the lid of your business. And I know that there are so many when I say that, and I've done intensives where I literally have to say to the CEO is like, listen, you're the problem here. And they're like, I'm not the problem. The team member, it's them. They're doing blah, blah, blah. Or it's the industry, it's the marketing, it's the blah, blah, blah. And they have all these people to blame. And I'm like, yes, but if the team member is not fulfilling their expectations, who trained them? If the team member doesn't know where they're supposed to put something, where's their SOPs? If the team member is not getting you the outcomes you want for the business, where's their KPIs? If the team member, like the list goes on and on. And it's because it all stems back to you. One of the hardest things for many business owners to accept is that it's always you. It's your business and it's always something connected to you. So does this mean that like if you have a team member who's just not pulling their weight that you're like, "Oh, I should just forever let them stay because it's always my fault." No. It means that you have to take radical responsibility if a team member doesn't work out as to how did we miss something in the hiring process? If this is truly just a personality flaw, how did we, not train the way that we needed to? Maybe we didn't have effective resources for them to use to guide them in their execution. Like, where could we have done or performed better or shown up better for this person to be able to get them better or different results? And so when we look at ownership, you are often the bottleneck because your expansion is needed for your business's expansion. There's also situations I've seen, like I have an agency that I work with, and the CEO just like really loves to be in the weeds, really loves to be, in the thick of it, in the fire. And it's part of why they love their business. But the thing that is capping the business is the fact that this business owner will not get out of the weeds. And that is because they have team members, but the team members they delegate to, they kind of still want to hold the reins a little bit. They still want to be a little bit in the mix just so that they have a role in it. But when they have so many team members and they kind of want to be in the mix with all these team members, it means they're kind of just not really out of the business. They're not out of the day to day. They kind of put themselves back in. So again, in this situation, they are the bottleneck. If, for example, you find yourself saying, well, this is not something that I can delegate, or I can't teach this, or only I know how to do this, again, you are the bottleneck. If you also have beliefs about what is possible in your business, if you have beliefs around, my business can't possibly have this many clients, or my business can't possibly do this without working more hours. Again, this goes back to mindset. If you have not opened and increased your vision of what's possible for your business will never exceed that vision, because you, as the owner of the business, are responsible to translate that vision, that picture of what you see for the business, to your team. So if you are capped in your vision and what you see possible, your team will never exceed the vision that you set for the business. On the contrast, if you do the work and you do actually look to put this time and energy into this, and you expand your vision and you have this big picture and it's detailed and you understand where you're going and why you're going there, and every year you're looking to kind of update this vision to keep it expanding as your team grows, that allows, as you expand, your team to follow with you. But oftentimes, what can happen is you're staying stagnant as a CEO, so your business stays stagnant, or worse, you stay stagnant, but some of your team members or some of the people who work with you grow, 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 and they actually outgrow you and they leave because they recognize that this is kind of a sitting duck. This is not something that's moving. I'm not feeling momentum. I'm going to go get better elsewhere. So it's something that is so important because in so many areas, it doesn't really matter the scenario. There's a million that I could mention. Oftentimes, you are the bottleneck of your business. And I think it's something first we have to accept and be able to really just like say to ourselves, okay, like, wow, I am the lid of this. Like, I'm the thing that has to get out of here, or I'm the thing that needs to create better systems, or I have to do X. Like, to have an awareness that it's you is like the first step. But then the second is like, what do you want to do about it? All of us have moments where we kind of get in the way, right? We all have these moments where we probably are like, okay, I got to get out of here. Like, this is not where I'm supposed to be in the business, right? It's okay to have these moments where you fall behind, but having the awareness of it, as we talked about earlier, having that clarity versus execution are two totally different things. So if you know that you're the bottleneck right now, the question becomes, how do you plan to remove yourself as a bottleneck? What is the strategy to remove yourself as a bottleneck? Or maybe it's not even a strategy thing that needs to happen, but it's more a matter of you need to be okay with no longer being the bottleneck. Because here's the thing, people think that they don't want to be the bottleneck of their business, but sometimes we actually get positive reinforcement from staying in something, meaning staying as the bottleneck. So, like this client that I mentioned who's in the mix, they're not in the mix because like they're aware that they're the bottleneck. They're aware that because they have to approve things and review things and all of this, that they are the reason that the business is slowing down, is because like they don't have enough time to get things back in time for the team, and it kind of derails the rest of the group. But the reason they're in, we uncovered, was not because they like to slow down everybody down. It was because when we got down to a deeper level, there was this fear of like, well, if I leave the business in this regard, like, what am I going to do? Like, what's my role? What's going to be my place moving forward? Like, this is what I've always done. This is the place that I've always been in the business. And so if I leave here, where do I go? Like, what does that mean for me? What do I end up doing? What's the next step? And so what we identified was this person was not in the weeds with their team because they didn't trust their team. It wasn't because they didn't, believe that they could delegate these. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with the fact that there was this acceptance that had to happen, that if they were going to go to the next level, their role as a CEO was going to change, that they had to be okay and accept that. And so that became the question, which is, could they accept that? Could they accept that the identity of where they had to go as a CEO was going to change? And only if that happened would the business continue to scale. And so eventually we got this person to that place, but it is something that, again, only came up because they accepted that they were the bottleneck of the business. One of the great quotes that I learned from a mentor that I worked with previously, George Bryant, he had a quote that he shared with me early on in coaching, and it was that scaling comes from retention, not from acquisition. And this is something that I really think a lot of business owners, and it's fair that this might be a misconception you have, that it's just about selling more and it's about more marketing and it's about all that. The real way to scale your business is not through more marketing and it's not through more sales. It's not just about we need to sell, 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 and we need to market our little tush off. And if we do that, that's the way we're going to grow this business. It really has everything to do with retention. Because if you think about a client that pays you, let's just say $2,500 a month or $2,000 a month, and this client pays you $2,000 a month, and that client stays with you for 3 years, right? That, if you have a 6-month contract, if you didn't have that client, you would need 5 other clients to generate the same amount of revenue as that one client staying with you for 3 years. So, the thing that I think most people miss the mark on is that in business, especially in the online world, there's a lot of, we need TikTok, we need podcasts, we need Instagram, we need more marketing, and you always need marketing. It's not to say that you should stop marketing by any means. You do. You still have to have new leads coming in. But the amount of pressure, the amount of urgency, the amount of intensity at which you need those leads or at which you need that pressure around sell, 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 that's going to feel so intense if you have no retention. Like I have scaling businesses that I work with that are doing multiple 7 figures and like they are not bringing in, 20 leads a week. Like they are not at a place where they're having to bring in tons and tons and tons of new people because they have retainer clients or they have ongoing monthly payment clients. And those clients are very happy clients and they've been paying them for years. So, what most people don't understand about scaling and even growing a business is that what you should be focused on first and foremost is making sure that your existing clients are happy. Your existing clients are getting results, that your existing clients are satisfied. And only once you do that will you then be able to then pivot focus onto marketing and sales. Because I want you to think about marketing and sales are the lifeline of a business, but no one ever said that the sales had to come from new leads. Think on that for a second. Sales are the heart of the business, but no one said that the sales had to come from new leads, right? So if you think about how fast are you burning through people in your business right now? So, like, if you have someone who joins with you for 3 or 6 months, do they leave after 3 to 6 months or are they kind of with you for a year and a half or 2 years? If you are signing people for 6 months and then they're leaving and then they're leaving and they're leaving, that is a huge problem because it means that you're constantly starting back at zero, which is why you're struggling to scale. Effective scaling comes from focusing on retention first and foremost, and most importantly, before going into anything acquisition focused, meaning the generating of new clients. So that is something that I would say is a hard truth because marketing and sales is very sexy. The front end marketing can feel really exciting and it feels really, liberating and kind of like energizing. But the thing is, it's not something that will actually, just in focusing on that alone, truly help you to scale. The other thing I want to also note is, and this is something that has come up very recently within all businesses that I'm involved with, is that cash flow issues do not disappear just because your revenue grows. And I think that there's this belief, like there's a series of different financial situations that can happen in a business, but some financial situations cannot be fixed by just making more money. And I'll give you an example. I had a client and they were in the marketing agency space and they came to me and they were like, "Kate, we are bringing in like $50,000, $60,000 a month and we are not making any money. We need more sales." And I was like if we're making $50,000, $60,000 a month and we're not making any money, you making 120 a month is not going to fix the problem. I was like, there is something else going on here. So I said, send me your P&L, send me your offer breakdown. We have like a process we go through with clients to help them to determine their profit margins for their business. And so when we went through this exercise, we realized very quickly that if they signed more people, they were literally just going to put themselves deeper and deeper into a hole because on some clients that they were serving, they were actually losing money, meaning like they were paying a team member to serve this client and they were in the negative $500. So if they kept serving that client, again, if we want people to have retention, if that person had stayed for a year, which what we'd hope for retention purposes to scale a business, if that person stayed, but they were actually in the negative with that client, 500, 500, 500 every month, over a year, you're taking a big loss on that client. And so what we realized was their margins were basically non-existent, inexistent, non-existent. And so what we looked at, and I'm going to give you an example. Say you have a client who's paying you $2,000 a month. This is getting a little nerdy, but hang on, okay? I'm right here with it. The client pays you $2,000 a month. But it costs you with, maybe let's just say if it's social media, you have an editor, you have a designer, you have a copywriter, you have all these people, and you have taxes. Okay. So you add all of those pieces together underneath the expenses of this client, and this client is costing you $1,995. So what happens is that the client pays you $2,000, and then you have to pay back to the business through team and other things almost 2,000, which means yes, you have team members, yes, you have a client, but you are a wash. You're not making any money in the business. I have seen businesses that have continued that way sometimes for a year and a half, meaning the clients are paying them, they're paying out to their team, and they are literally just rinsing money. There's no generating of any growing behind the scenes of any kind of money. There's no reinvesting because there is nothing to reinvest. There was no profit. So with this client, they truly said they like, if I just get more clients, I said, listen, this and you getting more clients, I actually would recommend you don't get new clients right now. Because if you signed more clients, you're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the negative, which means you're actually adding on to your lack of profit. Your loss this year would become greater if you signed more clients. So this is why understanding numbers, understanding profit and loss, understanding, packages and percentages and all of these things are really important because if you don't, it means that if you just keep believing more marketing, more sales, you pushing in marketing and sales could actually be the thing that's the reason your business is staying stuck. And I will tell you, one of the things that I work on with a lot of people is their offers, their P&Ls, their pricing, their packages, like all of it. And the reason that I do that is I want people like yourself to be educated around how to make smart financial decisions for your business and also to know when at a given moment you need to, make certain adjustments or make certain changes or, look at being educated in the choices to make, the decisions to make, and when to make those. And the other thing, which kind of coincides with this, which is another hard truth, is that I think many people believe that just making more money will be the thing that helps them to finally feel rich. I was actually having this conversation with somebody yesterday because what I was explaining is when you started your business, say you're making $5,000 a month in your business, okay? Or in whatever you're doing. And then you go to 10,000. There's a lot of people who upgrade their lifestyle or they upgrade their cost or their expenses of their business to match whatever they're making. Then you make $20,000 a month and then you upgrade your car and you upgrade your home or you potentially add more team members. Great. Then you're at $30,000 a month. Then you decide that you want to buy some new toy or you want to go on a trip or you want to add more team members and then you're investing into bigger, more expensive things. Great. Now we're at 50K a month and it goes on and on. And someone said to me, they're like, Kate, why do I feel more broke at seven figures than I did at like $200,000 a year? Like, how is that possible? There's more money. And I said, yes, there's more money, but if you don't build it with whatever your goal is in mind, you may still feel, depending on what's important to you, you may still feel broke because sometimes to have a bigger business, sometimes there's bigger expenses. So I often tell people, like, say your goal is that you want to bring home personally a lot of money a month, or you want to have a lot set aside, maybe even in the business for you and investments and things like that. if that's your goal, you may not actually need to have a seven-figure business in order to do that. And this is again why understanding money is really important, because some people believe, again, back to more marketing, more sales, if I just sell, 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 and I just make more money, that will fix everything. And in some instances, yes, more sales is the issue, but just having a bigger business may not necessarily give you the life that you want. I had another client who came to me and they said, I really want to buy rental properties. And originally she told me her goal was seven figures. So when we reverse engineered the numbers, I very quickly said to her, you do not need a seven figure business. So unless there's another reason you need or want a seven figure business, if your goal is to buy a property, like a single property or two properties for rentals for you and your family, you could easily do that at like $600,000 a year and you would be good. You don't need to have a seven figure business. And it really helped her to see that, like, having more money wasn't going to solve anything. And also, depending on how you operate as an entrepreneur, if you upgrade your life significantly as you make more money, you're also going to have a new standard at which you have to maintain, which is why some people feel like even though they're making more in the business, they're not feeling like they're making more personally. And that's because they've upgraded their lifestyle so much that they just have a new standard that they have to maintain. So, to really have millions in the business or millions personally and not feel broke means you really have to understand money management, and you also have to really know what is actually your goal. Is the goal revenue, or is the goal that you have a certain take home? Because if your metric of success for you is your lifestyle and your take home, that should be your strategy, not just more revenue. Because, say, for example, if you're an agency, you don't want to have more revenue because in some instances it means more team. So if your goal is to lower expenses, those two goals actually potentially could collide. One of the other truths that I wouldn't say that I've learned this through me, but I've learned this through proxy is that your reputation moves a lot faster than your marketing. So if you are somebody who feels like you want to grow your business rapidly, you should be focusing on your reputation. Because I will tell you, your reputation is something that is the hardest thing to turn. If you have a bad reputation, if you have a reputation that is known as a negative thing in this industry for whatever reason, bad service, unethical marketing, bad delivery, whatever it might be, that is something that is so difficult to turn. I will say you can build an incredible reputation, and it does take time because obviously, as more people experience you, they have more and more positive feedback about the experience with you. But the thing that I will say that I've seen with peers and that I've seen with people that I know is that your reputation can be burned to the ground in seconds. And so your reputation has the ability to move so much faster than your marketing. You can say whatever you want, you can post whatever you want, you can, publicize whatever you want, but at the end of the day, your reputation is something that is really typically going to come from the people who interface with you. And with that, they can really build up your reputation pretty quickly through word of mouth. But if you do make the wrong moves, or if you are potentially, operating your business in a non-ideal way, it does have the ability to also be completely dismantled in seconds. I saw somebody that I know, very recently who had kind of posted some controversial things on the internet, and they basically like lit their brand on fire overnight. It also brought to the forefront some people who were dissatisfied with the brand and some of the other things that they had posted previously. And this kind of gave them the opportunity to bring those things to the forefront. A truth that you're not going to like, but it is important for you to know, is that entrepreneurship is going to give you freedom, but not at first. Entrepreneurship will give you freedom at some point, but at first, it is going to give you responsibility because so many, and I get it. We want the laptop lifestyle. We want to sit on the beach. We want Aperol spritzes. We want to, be able to just sit there, or maybe the Aperol spritz is just for me. But we sit there and we want this like drink on a beach, and we want to be able to work and have these notifications coming in and all of these things. And listen, that is possible for you. So I don't want you to think by any means that that is not possible. I literally have clients who are traveling all over and making boatloads of revenue in their business. It is 1,000% possible. Here's the thing, it's not going to happen at the beginning. It's going to take years for that to be possible for you. So when you are watching other people with their laptop lifestyle online and you're like, why do I feel like I don't feel very free right now? When you're building, you're not going to experience a lot of freedom because you have to build that freedom. You have to build the marketing, the sales, the offers to create that freedom. So you can have a lot of financial time, location freedom in your business, but you may not necessarily have it all at the beginning because truthfully, entrepreneurship is going to first give you responsibility and then it's going to eventually give you freedom. It really only is going to become freedom, though, if you have the discipline that you need to earn that freedom. It doesn't get handed to you. Just because you have a business or you are an entrepreneur doesn't mean you get to just have these notifications coming in and money coming in and I don't have to be on all the time. You have to create the systems and the marketing and the sales and the brand and the pieces necessary to have that reality. And when you're building that, it does take time and you kind of have to earn that freedom that you're looking for. This is one that I know I was kinda mentioning to the idea earlier of, like, I'm not always, of the belief that it's always who's the smartest. I really believe that obsession and drive and determination and consistency are really going to beat talent every single time. Every single time. I do not believe that it's like you're the person who's the most talented, so therefore you're the most successful. There are people that I know who are just so ridiculously consistent. There's no way that anyone will beat them at the level of hard work that they do and how consistently they do that work. So if you are somebody that really wants to grow within your business, you also want to recognize that it's not always just about how do I get the best at this? It could also be the question of how do I get more consistent at this? Or how do I get more obsessed with this and mastering it? How do I make sure that I'm putting in the reps as fast as I can at this thing to over time develop that mastery? But it may not be there at the beginning. And I think consistency and hard work are often undervalued. I think a lot of people believe that if they're not good at something initially, or if it's not a natural talent of theirs, or whatever it might be, that that's not something they can excel in. I know a lot of people who were very mediocre at certain things or maybe had no skills in certain areas and somehow have dominated their industry. And that is not because they even technically became the best at what they do out the gate. They didn't have the talent there, but they became obsessed with over time looking to sharpen that skill again and again and again. Now, the last one is if you cannot sell it, you do not have a business, you have a hobby. And I know this is going to land because I hear this all the time. People say, Kate, I hate to sell. I hate selling. And I don't personally resonate with that because I love selling, but I need you to understand that selling is the difference of whether what you do is a hobby or in some buckets, it's charity or if it is a business that generates revenue. And it's also not to say that having it as a hobby is bad. If you want to have a hobby, do it. Like if you want to be a content creator or you want to be an editor as a hobby for somebody, go ahead. If you want to, have a charity where you give back and you do social media for brands of a specific type, okay, great. Do that. Like I love that for you. Go do that. But that's not a business. That is not the same as the business that you are making right now. And the thing that I will say is like something I'm passionate about with sales is that sales is service. And the only reason that people get weird about selling or they don't like to sell, or I don't want to annoy my audience, or I don't want to feel like, people feel like I'm selling to them. I'm like, you should feel like you're selling to people because you are selling to people. Like, let's not have the cognitive dissonance here to believe that we're not selling to people. In fact, we are. We are selling to people, but here's the difference. I'm not selling to you because I'm like, give me your money. I'm not selling to anybody who doesn't have the problem. So for example, if you see people, this is how I want you to think about it. You see people outside and they're all standing in the rain and they're getting soaked. Do you feel bad for selling them an umbrella? No, because they're getting torrential downpour on them in the rain. So why with your offer or why with your service are you feeling bad about selling somebody the quote unquote umbrella who has been standing in the rain, sometimes for days, weeks, months, or years, and the rain being their problem? That's why for me, I don't understand. I understand the disconnect because I understand people's programming and the past experiences. And there's a lot of things that go into people's negative feelings around sales. So I understand where it comes from. But I don't understand why, if what you do is so impactful and it literally helps people and it changes their life and it has the ability to change their business, change their health, change their mental health, change their systems, whatever it might be, whatever area you're in. If what you do has the ability to completely change somebody else's reality, if you have the ability to take someone who is getting rained on and give them an umbrella to finally give them a dry, safe, calm space to stand, why would you not do that? And the thing that I think, and this is my motto in sales, is like, how selfish of me to have 15 umbrellas and see 15 people in the rain and never offer any of them an umbrella. Now, here's why I go back to hobby and charity. If you are somebody who has 15 umbrellas and you just want to give them away, then give them away. Perfect. You can have a charity. You can have a hobby. You could have something where you just do this out of the goodness of your heart and you don't want any money from it. That's okay. But if you want to sell the umbrella, if you want to have an umbrella company, to our analogy, if you want to have an umbrella company, sell them the umbrella. I was thinking about this recently. I went to a concert. I went to go see the Goo Dolls. And when I was leaving the concert, we stopped. I was with my sister-in-law and Kelsey, one of the incredible women on our team. And we are coming out of it and we stopped and there was a hot dog cart. I'm like, take my money. Like, I want a hot dog. Take my money. Like, when you're there and you pay for that, it's at the end of the night and you haven't eaten and you're starving and it's there. It was also, we had lawn seats. So you sit on the lawn. And I thought, wow, we look over and there's people who have chairs. And I was like, wow, I'm 33. I would love a chair. So I thought, wow, that's great. I went and I looked for the chair because I thought I had the problem of not wanting to sit on the ground. I would love to have a chair. So we went and we go pick up these 3 chairs and I give them money for the chair. I'm not like, how could you take my money for this chair? I'm like, I want the problem solved of not sitting on the ground. How could you take my money for that hot dog? I'm not going to be like, why is he selling these to me right now? Because I'm starving and he knows it. The thing that is important to remember is that you are in the business of selling, but you want to remember you're not in the business of selling people who don't have the problem you solve. So, yes, you could feel weird about selling to people who don't have or need what it is that you're selling. So, for me, I always root into I am not a charity. At least I don't have one at this moment, to be determined, maybe in the future. But I don't have a charity at this moment. And I don't want to look at this as a hobby. I'm here to serve people, but I'm also only going to sell to people who I know for a fact have the problem that it is that I'm looking or that I can help people to solve. So I had a list of like 2 more lists of these hard truths because there's a lot of them. Let me know how you feel about this. Maybe we'll do a part 2. If you want to slide into my DMs and just be like, "Hey Kate, I would love a part 2 of the hard truths." We have a lot more that we did not cover. And so if this is a style of episode that you feel like was helpful for you as kind of a list format, some mottos, some hard truths that you want to kind of start to integrate and think about, I would love to hear from you. If you want to shoot me a message on Instagram, just to let me know that you would love a part 2, we will get that on the schedule for you. But I hope today was helpful. Maybe there's a couple that you saw yourself within. Maybe there's a couple even examples or stories we talked about today that will help you to say, okay, I really realize that I need to work on that, or that's a principle that I want to execute, or it's a practice that I want to get into myself. And as always, like I love, like genuinely love when you guys reach out and you say, hey, here was my takeaway from this week's episode. Something that landed for you, something you want to integrate, or maybe even just maybe there's a line or a motto or a hard truth that you are really excited to start to integrate deeper within your business. Whatever it is, we know that when you share in transformation and you're witnessed in it, it really does land at such a deep level. And so this is your invitation to be witnessed in something that landed and kind of transformed a small part of you today. So with all that being said, I will see you on the next episode. And as always, stay ambitious.